Now it opens up down the middle. Big run. As Keith moves it quickly. Now Adams picks up Malcolm. Malcolm jinks off his left foot. Defence comes at him, brings him down. Still opportunities both ways. Here for the Arrows. There's Mirez. Comes off his wing looking for work. Shepherd. Contact as he puts that back into Lesage. The Arrows here knocking on the door. They'd love another try. Ibiasiata. He'd love 5 points next to his name. Cap off a great night already for his Arrows debut. McKenzie, quick hands. Yana already with 5 points. They come right again. Quick hands will do it. Moore in the corner. Beautiful ball from Adams though. Flat cut out pass to Moore. And the skipper gets 5. And you can see him thanking his fly half right there. Beautiful lead up work from the number 10 from New Zealand.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast. My name is Dan Murphy and with me always is Derek Brissett and Stu Hardy. Gentlemen, thank you for coming to my aid last weekend and taking over hosting duties. We want to thank Andrew Ferguson for coming on and chatting with the guys. It was a great interview. A lot of really nice, honest conversations about the professional sports field going on right now with COVID-19. So thanks again, Andrew, for coming on. Gentlemen, I do think I have an answer for your question that you asked, Andrew, though, about who's the best fictional character that could become a rugby player. Because I thought about this. I've been thinking about this.
I don't think we asked Andrew Ferguson that, but I think we just kind of.
I think you did at the end of it, didn't you not?
No, we didn't actually ask him about that. We just talked about it after we interviewed him.
Okay. Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
See, now we know you actually don't listen to these when you're away. You just it's try to come up with a talking point to make it sound like you actually listen.
It's quite the opposite.
We're seeing right through you.
I hate the sound of my own voice, so I'm only going to listen if I'm not on the podcast.
Yeah, but you didn't attentively listen though. So
I
that's
guess not.
Knock against you because
I think I was doing something else.
The interview with Andrew
cooking.
Ferguson was already done. Either way, I would like to hear your thoughts on fictional character here.
So I think that my fictional character would be a fullback. I think that you can pick any of them because there are numerous reiterations of this character. But I think having a Green Lantern as your fullback, and I thought about which one for a period of time because you have John Stewart, who's got a background in the military as an architect. Hal Jordan is kind of considered the most powerful Green Lantern, but I'm sticking with Kyle Rayner. And the reasoning why is I like a fullback who's creative, and Kyle Rayner was formerly an artist and a cartoonist. So he has been known to be one of the most creative Green Lanterns. And if you want a guy that's going to be able to catch those fly balls, he's going to be able to use his power ring to make a giant hand. He's going to be able to grab it in. And if he's got, if a prop makes a line break and he's coming down on him, he's just going to make a giant wall and he's going to crash right into it. And you know what? Maybe he needs to blast that ball out of his end. He's just going to make a cannon and he's just going to fire that ball out of the cannon. So I think that any Green Lantern would suit the fullback position, but I think Kyle Rayner gets my vote.
I don't think Kyle Rayner can be an All Black though. They have that big no dickheads rule, so it might not gel too well in the locker room there.
Well, alleged no dickheads. I feel like if you ask anybody, especially Australians, they'd say that a couple of the All Blacks are dickheads.
Well, they just say that because he loses, though. Kyle Rayner has like a galaxy of people that think he's a dickhead.
Wow.
No, I understand that. I understand your point, though. This is getting Kyle Rayner is like the least liked Green Lantern. I like that you went with that.
You think he's more least liked than Guy Gardner?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? No, I think you're right. I think Guy Gardner is the guy that I'm thinking of. That's the dickhead. Yeah, I think I'm Guy Gardner. No, you're right. You just called me out on my comic bookness there. You're a very good call.
So this is like I need to get myself a pin and make that. That feels good. We are going to continue our.
I'm more of a Marvel guy. I got the DC things not completely locked away. Sure. Damn. Yeah. You know what, though? I actually did kind of think about this after, and if you really want an answer, Agent Venom, the only Marvel character that has actually been listed as having played rugby. or whatever. So
where would you put him? That's Flash Thompson, right?
Yeah, it's Flash Thompson. Agent Venom, though, like when he goes to the army and is Venom in the army or whatever. But there's like one comic book where he has a throwaway line where it's basically he's basically saying, like, somebody asked him to go do something and he was like, I can't make it, I got a rugby practice. And that's the only time it's mentioned. It's like one issue, just a one-off thing of I have to go to a rugby practice.
There you go.
There you go. He plays rugby, so that could be an X factor.
There you go. Put him at 8 man. We will be continuing our interviews of some more Arrows. We've got a couple more guys that we wanted to line up. However, between MLR and the Arrows themselves dropping the news, we decided to take a week off from our interviews, and we've got lots of rugby news to talk about. So let's dive right into it, gentlemen. And we're going to start with Major League Rugby itself, because it released not the full schedule, but a outline of what 2021 is going to look like. The big thing is that it's going to be starting in March, and not in end of March, as a matter of fact, March 20th. And then the championship game will be August the 1st. So there'll be 8 weeks of regular season, 16 matches, 2 weeks of playoffs. Guys, what is this all going to look like? Because it's pretty chaotic when there's only 13 teams.
Yeah, well, I guess, the important thing I think right now, like, the schedule was initially supposed to be, they were targeting February as a start date. I believe it was like the weekend, like February 12th, 13th, 14th, that kind of stretch there was kind of the target for the original start date. I think pushing it back is good for a couple of reasons, like the least of which is it buys you a little bit more time to kind of figure out what you're going to do and what your COVID plan is going to be. When the announcement came out, there was also that article with that George Killebrew did a little interview with Martin Pengelly of The Guardian, and he was kind of stating that there is a COVID plan, like a couple COVID contingency plans, right? So one of those plans is a shortened season, one of those plans is a bubble. And, at the very least, I think if you were to kind of give them that extra month, you can kind of figure out what's best for the league. You get to watch, we get to see like the NBA and the NHL have been pretty successful with their bubble scenario. The MLB got off to a pretty rocky start with the Florida Marlin franchise, or I guess the Miami Marlins. They changed their name a few years back, but I still call them Florida. So I think they kind of got off to a little bit of a rocky start with that, but it's been all reined in. And I think, yeah, like there's obviously going to be some issues, but I think pushing the season back to March, one of those benefits is going to be it buys you a little bit more time to figure out what exactly you want to do.
Yeah, I agree in the sense that I think it's now going to be a case that there will likely be a second spike in COVID over the winter, and combined with flu season, that's obviously going to be a very precarious time. Flu season also lasts until, from my recollection, into late February, early March. So the end of March will probably mark the start of spring, and should, in theory, be the best time to engage in contact sports in outdoor stadia. This also allows more time for the development of a treatment or a vaccine in place, which would then not only just benefit all the players and the coaching staff, but may even give the opportunity to have fans in attendance in stadia if the treatment or vaccine is readily available. Most likely there would still be social distancing put in place, but the opportunity to have bums in seats, essentially, and more importantly, ticket sales, will undoubtedly be of a major benefit to MLR, and it's probably one of the big considerations of why the season was pushed back.
It's interesting. We know that the landscape of COVID in the States is pretty rough, but even here in Ontario, we've had almost 500 cases in a day yesterday, or I guess I should say Friday, so a few days ago here in Ontario. So it's starting to rise both here in Canada and also in the States. So it is going to be interesting where the virus is in March. It is quite a long time away. So how will this have a positive benefit for northern teams like Toronto, New York, New England? I mean, the first year of the Arrow's existence, we remember the split between the two. On the road for the first half of the season, home on the back end. This gives them a little bit more versatility in terms of planning their schedule, does it not?
Yeah, I think so. I think firstly to kind of just touch on what you were talking about there, I think like the NFL is starting to allow fans in, so we're getting a little bit of that experimentation. So the MLR can also get to see how that goes. The Dallas Stars are doing watch parties in their arena for the Stanley Cup Final as well.
Doesn't mean it's a good idea. Just because Dallas is doing it doesn't mean it's smart.
It might not. It might not be. I guess we'll find out how good of an idea it actually is. But I think from the MLR's perspective, though, you get to see what happens when you do that.
Oh, for sure,
right? So that is the
and
benefit.
MLR and rugby in general has the benefit of being an outdoor sport.
Yeah.
So
but
they're going to have a lot more lenience towards having things happen because things are outside. And if you distance, I mean, Toronto might not be as lucky because their stadiums are a little bit smaller, their venues.
They're still outside.
But teams like NOLA and their baseball diamond, they're going to be able to. So, like, you look at what NFL stadiums are looking like. If you can physically distance those guys, your fans easily, and have fans at your games.
And like I think that another key thing, like it is 6 months away still, right? Like this, we've seen how fast the whole. Like you just said, man, kids went back to school and COVID started spiking in Ontario, right? So it's like, it kind of feels like it's dying down, then it kind of comes back a little bit. So we'll see what actually happens. But moving on to the actual rugby elements of this, I think, pushing it back to to late March 20th is the first game, I think. And February 15th is also the first day of training camp. So that was the original start date of the season, or close to the original start date of the season. And I think, there's a lot of teams like the Toronto Arrows, New England, New York, that have been, because they are those cold weather teams, the league seems to not like scheduling home games for them. I know, like, Lamport Stadium, we have that little minor issue with the dome that even the Wolfpack also have to deal with, or where it's like the dome doesn't come down until April. So that's kind of a minor issue. But now that you're starting in late March, it's like that could be like week 3 of the season. You could play a game at Lamport Stadium. So, like, provided everything with the city of Toronto remains the same. But yeah, like, if you kind of look at like the shortened 2020 season, Toronto didn't have a home game. New England didn't have a home game yet. New York didn't have a home game yet. New England and New York were about to, the week that the season was canceled. Toronto wasn't set to have a home game until week 8 of the season. So, but like, there's also teams on the other end of that, like a team like Austin was scheduled to finish with 5 of their last 7 on the road, right? Because they get the home heavy first half of the schedule because they're in Texas. And, it's also like, Texas gets really hot in the summer too, right? So you don't necessarily want to. So, I sent that tweet out with that thought that it's like, maybe this opens up the door for a more balanced schedule, give teams like, the cold weather teams, they can have home games in week 2 or 3. They could actually, March 20th, you can have a home game in week 1, in New York, Toronto, or Massachusetts. So that's fine. But it's like, I think, and, the commissioner, George Killebrew, actually responded to that tweet, kind of echoing that and being like, that, like, they're saying that there was many benefits of why they pushed the schedule back. And that was obviously one of them. But I think that's the thing, like, right now, like, I feel like I hope this opens the door for them to do the more balanced schedule. And then if they push the season back to February next year, when like things can kind of go back to normal, because they were still planning on starting the season in February. So like, if it goes back next year, like, I hope that opens up the door to just be like, just let it play. Like, it's part of playing in North America, right? Like the NFL, they deal with, like, there's teams in Green Bay, there's teams in Buffalo. Guess what? In December in Green Bay and Buffalo, it's gonna snow. But you know what? But it's balanced out by having teams in Miami or Los Angeles, and Texas, right? Or teams play in domes if they, to facilitate some of the weather in certain places too, right? So, like, I think I would like to see like Major League Rugby kind of go with that approach. or whatever, like just be like, yeah, like, you know what, if New York has to have a home game, there's a risk that it snows. And it's like they've been doing this for a couple of years, and it's like we all remember like when Toronto played Glendale in the snow, and it was like you could see there's like 3-foot snowbanks on the sidelines while they were playing, right? Utah's had snow, so it's like it's not like it's been completely avoided. So I mean, hopefully that's part of it. Hopefully we get a little bit more of a balanced schedule. I think the big key thing too is with the way the schedule works right now. So the MLR is keeping it as a 20-week total season, like 20 weeks from opening kickoff to the shield being raised, which is the same length of time that it would have been in 2020 as well, right? So I think like that's key. And I think the key thing with that too is if I just like double check my dates here, it's seems like it's looking unlikely that there will be any international rugby until the ARC in 2021 for both the Canadian team and the American team. So in that being said, like the way the ARC was scheduled this year, like the start date was supposed to be mid-August, right? So I wrote this down somewhere, and yeah, so if we have, all right, I found my notes. Organize your notes before you start recording podcasts, gentlemen. You should don't take my notes on or word for it. Just have your notes organized here. Either way, so yeah, so the 2020 ARC, the first game of that was supposed to be August 15th, right? So that would be like right now the last game of the. So let's just say if we use that same weekend. Right. So it'd be August 14th, the Saturday, 2021, August 14th would be like the first weekend. So you would have between the shield being raised and the first weekend of the ARC, you have 2 weeks, basically. You have 13 days before the kickoff. If they kept the ARC at the same week, which seems like it might be kind of cutting it close for certain players that maybe get to the final in the MLR, but you would also have guys that who's only 4 teams are going to make the playoffs, right? Because they got rid of the one playoff round in order to accommodate the fact that with 13 teams, and we'll dive into this a little bit more too, but with 13 teams, you're going to need that extra bye week because every week has to have somebody not playing. Yeah. So they got rid of that one championship or that one round of the championship series. So it's still a 20-week season, which means the team that gets like teams that don't make the playoffs, like their last game will be July 17th, 18th. So those players will have a month before the ARC. Teams that miss out in the semifinals will be the 24th, 25th. So they'll get their 3 weeks. And then, so it's like like 2 weeks might be a quick turnaround for the guys that are in the finals. But if that ARC stays in that same zone, you could still do it. And more importantly, like if the ARC stays in that same zone, it doesn't necessarily conflict with an international window. So all the teams in the playoffs can keep their players. So it kind of seems like like you said, George Killebrew said that there's a plan to shorten the season if it's needed. So we'll see if maybe that has to come into play. But for right now, you can still slot your 20-week game season in, and it sounds like you'll be able to do it without actually conflicting with that international window. It might be a quick turnaround for the guys that have to play in the championship game, though.
So, Stu, how will this uneven conference work? I mean, 13 teams, it's going to be quite the jig for MLR to make it work.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, as Derek mentioned, there are 13 teams, so there's going to be a 1 week bye at least per week. There will be some instances of having 3 teams take a bye, which was the case this year as well. So if we're going on the same format as 2020, which would have been home and away for all the teams within your conference, then the Western Conference with 7 teams will have 12 games. So that'll be 6 home and 6 away. The issue comes around with the Eastern Conference because that only had 6 teams. That's 5 home and away games for a total of 10. What I would say at this point is that there be 2 extra fixtures against teams, and they will be home and away, and that ensures that there's no bias for any team having, say, 2 home games or one team having 2 away games. So it would just be a constant throughout. And I would therefore say that for rivalry's sake, New York and New England should have a home and away extra game. Then I'd just say Toronto and DC, and then NOLA and Atlanta, and that will ensure that everything gets to 12 games. Then I would say the remaining fixtures are 4 cross-conference games, and that will be 2 home and 2 away, again, making sure everything's balanced and everything's even, and that brings us to the total of 16 games. If you want to know what order those are in, tough. Maybe MLR can pay me, and then I'll be working for their logistics department.
So Stu, when you were saying that those extra games there, like you would say, like, would you say the Free Jacks would play Rooney an extra 2 times, like 1 home, 1 away?
Yes.
Was that what you were saying?
Yeah, I think that as well is that you have to look at like the local rivals as well. So New York and New England did play in Las Vegas in 2020, but you need to have the fans there. I've said it when it was announced, and I'll keep saying it. You need to have that local rivalry. Now, obviously, we know that New York and Toronto have history, but the history between New York and New England, you just can't compare, really. It's not even a contest in that sense. And talking about ticket sales, I think New York and New England would be the maximum ticket sales you could get. Maybe, I'm not saying sellout is definite, but it is more on the cards than I'd say with Toronto and New York. Toronto, therefore, I'd say I've just put them with DC. This would be also a case of just the least distance traveled to get there. And it's the same line of thinking with New Orleans and Atlanta. You know, as local, theoretically, as you can be
big rival.
For especially when one team's in a different country than the other.
And you know, DC's got a couple Canadians on their roster, so that would be
nice.
Cool for them to come back a little bit.
I think I agree with most of what Stu just said. I wrote an article for Layman Sports, I think back in like May or whenever the Raptors withdrew from the league, and I kind of broke down how I would do a 13-team schedule, which was before Hawaii. Is like I said 3 bye weeks to each team. Obviously, MLR is going to rock with 2 bye weeks, so making that a little adjustment. But I think ultimately I agree with Stu. You got to keep it to the 12 in-conference games and then 4 cross-conference games, and obviously you balance the home and away. But I don't think in the East I wouldn't have the teams play each other 4 times, even with like the big rivalry one. I would do. Like I would kind of borrow a little bit from, say, some of the other leagues, and it's like I wouldn't necessarily officially call them this, but I would be like, you know, with the NHL, the MLB, the NFL, they all have divisions within the conference, so I wouldn't necessarily go with. I don't want to call them divisions because I don't really want to do that, because I don't want to make something like super formal when it's like, hey, maybe there's going to be a 14th team next year and it balances the conferences anyways. But what I would do for this season is I would go, say you take, we'll say we take Toronto, have Toronto play, like, you have to play 2 extra games against your conference. So have Toronto play New England in New England and then play New York at home. And then it's like, it's a little bit more evenly balanced and stuff. Cause say like New York's one of the top teams in the conference, right? So it'd be like, or Toronto, right? So you could be like, yeah, DC with their struggling scrum. It's like, yeah, here's Toronto with one of the best scrums in the league. You guys get to play them 2 more times, right? And they're the best team in your conference, so you get to play them 2 more times. That could be a big like point swing and stuff. Obviously, strength of schedule is a thing that, you know, the NFL deals with, and right, where it's like, or, you know, every league that has divisions realistically, because like, you know, we'll see it across sports. It's like some divisions are better than other divisions, right? Some conferences are better than other divisions. We saw that in Major League Rugby this year, where it was like the West was getting killed by the East for a lot of the first 5 games of the season, and or at least the first 5 weeks of the season, I should say. So I think like that's something that you'd have to consider, but I think you would have to, like, I think if you give them just an extra game against 2 other teams, I think that's a little bit more balanced. And you just get to play one at, again, I agree with Stu, 1 at home, 1 in away for that extra game within the division. But I would split that up, do 2 different teams. Like I said, I like Stu's idea of going with like the rivalry, a little bit, keep some of the rivalries intact. So I think like some of the rivalry for the East that could work, you would do, like you said, like Stu said, right? Toronto and New York already have a little rivalry brewing from their first seasons. That epic game to Toronto ended up clinching a playoff spot. Rooney lucked out and ended up making it anyways, even though they lost. But that epic Sam Malcolm drop goal game. So it's like there's a little bit of that history there. There's obviously the history with New England and New York, just the most natural sports rivalry in the United States. But it's also like, if you kind of look at what's happened in Toronto sports recently, Toronto and New England teams do not get along. Like, those fans don't like each other either. The Boston Bruins have been an absolute pain in the ass for Toronto Maple Leafs fans for well over a decade. And like, people still talk about the fact that they blew, like, every time the Leafs go up 4-1, it was 4-1 jokes, or that, like, those still happen. They couldn't, like, Austin Matthews still has, and John Tavares, like, they still haven't figured out how to beat them. It's been like a decade of losing to Boston for the Maple Leafs. And then, like the Raptors most recently just got eliminated by Boston either. So it's like Toronto fans don't like Boston very much. So that's a little rivalry too, even if it hasn't necessarily got to the rugby pitch yet. Hopefully it will. So I would go Toronto, New England, New York. I would make that one like mini division, so they play each other each an extra time. And then I would go to the South, where the NOLA, Atlanta, DC, and then they can they can play each other the extra time, home and away each. But I think ultimately, no matter how that schedule works out, I'm curious to see what Major League Rugby actually does end up doing. But just in my opinion, I think that's the way to do that. You keep it as a nice 12 in-conference games, 4 cross-conference games. But I also think for the cross-conference games, like, if this has to stay like this for a while, like, say, like, even next year, if you go to 7, say if next year we go to 14 teams as well, right? I would say, like, so that'll obviously kind of stay the same thing. If you keep it at 16 games, you're still going to have to kind of do the 12, and then you only play 4 teams in the other conference. So I would have Major League Rugby ideally try your best to be like season on season, kind of rotate the teams. So it could be like maybe every like you can go, like, say, if you have season tickets for the Arrows, if you hold on to them for 3 years, you'll get to see every team in the league at least once. Or something to that effect.
Yeah. Definitely a lot of options for them. I like the idea of Toronto NOLA. You can market it as Toronto needs to get over that hump if they want to win, because they've never beaten them before. Then you got NOLA, or then you got DC versus Atlanta. Both came in the league at the same time. They've had some back and forth games. So that lots of different options. But we're going to move on.
But also build them as that, though. Build them as like rivalry games.
I think either format that both of you guys suggested, there has to be a significant effort to advertise these.
Yeah, like call it a rivalry game or whatever. Like,
yeah,
the NHL does that with their, like, NBC has the like Wednesday night rivalry night. Sometimes NHL fans laugh at what NBC considers a rivalry within that, but they have like the heart's in the right place.
It's the benefit of having less games. Yeah. I mean, NBC has to do that every Wednesday night, so it never really adds up a lot. But
for this, you can do it. Yeah.
You can definitely do it. Football, I think football has kind of shown us you can advertise that way.
I think I like the idea, man. Like, conferences, divisions are good, right? Because it forces teams to play each other a lot more. And when you get like a little bit of a physical sport like that, right, you can get guys start to get on each other's nerves. As just like look you at always just, like you always want like respect and stuff in the game, but sports is always a little bit more fun with a little bit of genuine hate mixed in, and a little
testosterone. We're gonna move on, guys. And we've mentioned this article before, but Martin Pengelly of The Guardian, who has written a ton about Major League Rugby, he did an interview with Ben Foden when he first joined the league. Well, he's back at it, and he sat down with the what's his title? Official title?
Commissioner,
George Killebrew, the commissioner of MLR, and he sat down and really broke down what the plans are for in March, with COVID being a huge factor. And one of the things is, Derek's mentioned it already, is MLR supposedly has a COVID plans prepared in case they are disrupted again. Killebrew said that he doesn't want to confirm that there's going to be a bubble if they have to change the way things are. Just to give you guys a little bit of money, I know it's going to be very different because MLR doesn't have as much money, but on Hockey Night in Canada last night, Elliot Friedman reported that the NHL bubble cost between $75 to $90 million, and the NBA bubble cost $170 million. So again, two much larger leagues, and they have to pay for a lot more, but any type of bubble is going to cost a good amount of money.
The MLR might not be putting like barber shops in their bubble, custom-made barber
for
shops
sure. And we'll probably we would have to see what MLS ended up doing for their return to play tournament. But what kind of options does a small league like Major League Rugby have in a COVID world? Like what can they do if they can't do a bubble, tournament has happened already?
Well, I'd be interested to see what the bubble plan actually is. I would imagine it would be nowhere near as expensive as the NHL or the NBA.
The other thing is that
that doesn't mean you couldn't do it, though. It's just probably not going to be as expensive.
It also would be. I mean, I'll have to check my dates, but it would be quite longer than the NHL or what the NBA have done. We're going from March to August. Start?
When did the NHL fire up? When did they bring everybody to the bubbles?
Let me look into that while you talk.
Well, because one of the quote in the article is from George Killebrew is, "We do have in our back pocket a reduced season plan. We have a bubble plan that we're going to keep in our back pocket until we need it." And I think those are one and the same. It would be a case of if they have to go to a bubble version of the league, it'll probably most likely be that the cross-conference games are thrown out the window. And depending on the severity of COVID at the time, it could even be a case of you only play the other teams once, and that's it. So therefore, it goes from a 20-week season to less than 10.
Max, it started on August the 1st.
It started for the NHL?
For the NHL.
So they started those like pre-playoff games or whatever.
Yeah.
That 1X. Okay, so August 1st. That's that's about 2 months. Okay, yeah. So it'd be a little bit longer. But yeah, like I don't know. I don't know. I'd be curious to see what the plan is. It's good to know that they have a plan or that they've been working on a plan of some sort. I think right now, like one of the big issues that would come with either a contingency plan or anything is you do have to figure out a situation with the border because of the Toronto Arrows. And, the Blue Jays, like the Canadian government wouldn't let the Blue Jays play home games here, right? So if you're going to go with a situation where you are traveling, I wonder if that's part of the contingency plan. Like if we're like looking into like where could the Arrows play? 6 months from now is a long time though. Like who knows, the border may be opened up by then and maybe it's not an issue. That's a long time from now, but if the border is still closed, that might be something that you do have to look into. Because if the border is still closed and like the Blue Jays weren't allowed to operate within Canada and host home games with, MLB teams flying in and out of Toronto. I don't know how much the Canadian government will be how excited they're going to be for the Arrows if they ask for that. So that'll be an interesting one to see too. Killebrew didn't really let too much slip as to what the plan actually is. I think it's good to know that they do have a plan though. And hopefully it's one of those things where hopefully, I guess you hope that you don't need it, but I would say the biggest like red flag or issue to me right now, if you can figure out your schedule, is like what happens with the border. And, will guys be able to, fly in, fly out? Are the Arrows, is there going to have to be mandatory quarantines and stuff? Will the Arrows be able to host home games in Toronto? Is something that will need to be sorted out. And I guess we're just going to kind of be on wait and see with that. As far as what you put in the bubble, I have no idea. That could be a fun thing to ask guys at some point. But I feel like it's not going to be as extravagant as what the NHL and the NBA players got. Although, did you see that thing where it's like apparently the Eastern Conference teams, when they went out to Edmonton to be like to their new bubble when they got down to the conference finals. Whatever, apparently the Eastern Conference teams were like Toronto was so much better.
Yeah,
like the bubble was so much better in Toronto.
Well, they got to go to like BMO Field and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So
like MLSE was letting them like go play soccer on BMO Field or play what's that game, spike ball and stuff.
Yeah, throw football
so
around.
That's kind of funny. It's like Edmonton's like you're just stuck in a hotel room in Edmonton,
which is depressing enough. But hey. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, and I mean, they are kind of seeing what football, both the NFL and college football, are doing right and wrong. I mean, we've already seen coaches being fined hundreds of thousands of dollars for not wearing masks, and I believe a coach I was seeing today was not allowed to be on the sideline because he was displaying some symptoms. So. It's going to be very interesting to see.
Which is good. Like,
which is what they need to do.
If you're testing and wear masks and stuff, and then I think if you can figure out a safe way to do it, like people are gonna do what they can to try to make bring sports back and stuff, right?
Now, part of the article too, and Stu, I'm going to ask you first about this is, now. Killebrew didn't say this himself, but Pengelly kind of mentioned that a Chicago team is, according to his sources, apparently close to being created. Now, what could a team in the Midwest do for U.S. rugby? And again, Chicago has hosted some of the largest rugby matches in U.S. history at Soldiers Field, and the Chicago Lions Rugby Club is apparently a very strong club in the U.S. So, they've got the pieces there in terms of, they've got fans that might remember the All Blacks coming or Ireland coming to play. And then, they've got a strong little rugby club community there, So what does this all mean for the Midwest if the Chicago team can happen?
Well, on a personal note, when I arrived in Toronto in 2018, the big rugby weekend or the 3-game day in Chicago was happening a few months later. And silly me thought, it's a bit too early for me to go to Chicago. I'll go when it's next on, which would probably be 2020 because I'm an idiot. But closer to Chicago. As Derek has said in a previous podcast, Chicago is a huge TV market for the US. There's a lot of investment opportunities for having a team in Chicago. Just looking from the money perspective to have, and for MLR as a whole to have a team playing in Chicago. And like you said, the history of rugby being played in Chicago, it's one of the reasons why I think that if the US do get a World Cup, either the opening or final has to be played at Soldier Field just because of the history it has, but that's for another time. It's one of the things that George Killebrew and anyone else on the financial side of MLR have all said is that they just need an investment team and any city can host. And Chicago has been one of the cities that they've been looking at for their big expansion plan across North America. So I think this team will probably not make an appearance until 2021 at the earliest. There may
2022.
Sorry, yeah,
2022.
The years are escaping me. It's just, days just blend into one another.
Man, no, I completely agree with you. I actually had a really funny thing because I was me and my girlfriend, we were watching the Stanley Cup final, and then the other day, and I was we started dating around the Stanley Cup final. So partway through the game, I was what do you want to do for our anniversary this year? And she was like, what are you talking about? It's back in May. And I was just oh yeah, right. It's September. I was just, so apparently I don't associate our anniversary with a date. I associate our anniversary
sporting events
with game 3 of the Stanley Cup final. That's what so no matter what, it's that. So yeah, I completely agree. It's dates and everything all messed up right now.
Yeah. Well, I say that it may be, if it's announced soon that a Chicago team is forming, that 2021, I'd say
The Toronto Arrows had less time than Chicago had.
But guys, there's literally an announcement that it's going to be 13 teams.
That's the thing. Not that they're playing in the 2021 season of MLR, but they'll be playing an exhibition season.
Yeah, for sure.
And they could do it. And because it may even be a case that some of the teams on the bye week in the Eastern Conference may be like, okay, we're going to send our younger players or our less experienced players to play an exhibition game against the future Chicago MLR team. And it could even be a case of the Chicago Lions playing the Chicago MLR team, because I'm going to go ahead and guess that those two are going to be separate entities. And, so they will have the time to build a roster of players, get their coaching staff in order, and get prepared that when they do enter the 2022 season of MLR, they will be able to compete at a competitive level.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that the entrance fee is now $10 million, and MLR is also looking for you to have an extra $15 million in additional assets in order to join the league. So I guess collateral in case, the team goes belly up and isn't making money. They want to make sure you have a little bit backup money. So the cost for a team is getting larger and larger and larger. And I mean, it just makes organizational groups that haven't still put their bids in, like Chicago previously. And then especially any of those people are looking to make a Vancouver team. And it's guys, the clock is ticking. You are only making this even harder for yourself. So it is good that their bid is in, and the decision is going to be made hopefully pretty soon.
Yeah,
now,
I think they got to take that into consideration. I think it'd be interesting to see if they did form and they got that exhibition season. I think if I was in other MLR teams, especially in a first post-COVID season, I would not want any of my players playing extra games during a bye week. So I don't know. I don't feel like that would be the greatest idea, but I feel like you could organize something for them if they wanted to play and just build hype. We've seen that kind of formula has worked, right? Like the Free Jacks played an exhibition season, Old Glory played an exhibition season, the Arrows have played exhibition seasons, New York played an exhibition season, Atlanta did as well, I believe. So it's we've seen that as a formula that works. So I think that could be a good idea. I just don't think I don't think if I was coaching an MLR team, I wouldn't want my guys going away on a bye week to play an extra team during a post-COVID year. Plus, obviously, in any regular year, the chance that you get hurt in an exhibition game mid-season too, I think is too big of a risk that I would not want to be taking. But yeah, I think ultimately too, Chicago's an unreal city. It's a world-class city, and it's the third biggest TV market in the country, right? So I think no matter where you go with that, it's I think ultimately, I think for the league to be successful, as weird as it is, you need a team in Chicago, right? It's there's certain cities in North America, I think that you kind of look at the other big five sports, or even even places, even leagues lacrosse and stuff too, right? You need a team has to be in New York. You need a team in Boston. You need a team in Chicago, and you probably need a team in LA. I know the NFL went a very long time, whatever that was, 20 something years without having a team in LA. But probably longer than that. My football history isn't the greatest,
and now they've got two.
And now they got two back. Yeah, exactly. They went back, and now there's two. So it's yeah, exactly. And every other league, and it's you have the big Canadian market covered already too. Every league that has expanded into Canada, it's a Toronto team, the Blue Jays or the Raptors. Obviously the NBA went to Vancouver for a little bit, but the Grizzlies eventually moved to Memphis. And the Montreal Expos also were successful during their time, and then they ended up moving to Washington. So it's Toronto's been the one that's been able to sustain it anyways. So it's you kind of got that big Canadian market covered. And then, yeah, I think so, if you're looking to target those cities as well, Chicago just makes the most sense to me. And I think the benefit of Chicago too is it's not weird to put Chicago in the Eastern Conference That's where the Bulls reside in the NBA. So it's a nice, easy thing to shift through. You can keep the 3 Texan teams all together. And, it might be a little bit of a further trip for most of the East teams, but I think Chicago works. So if that's going to be the team, I'm all for a Chicago team entering MLR.
I think also Chicago and Toronto, you have then the Great Lakes rivalry, which would just be a marketing point. So go with that.
So to finish up kind of the interview stuff, Killebrew gave a vote of confidence to Adam Gilchrist, which kind of shocked some of us because we have questioned many things Mr. Gilchrist has done with his ownership rights. But Killebrew says he's one of our strongest owners. Not only is he financially capable to own 2 teams, he's also steadfast in that he loves this and he's enthusiastic about MLR as anybody. Now, we also kind of got some interesting news about Mr. Gilchrist and his teams as the Gilgronis announced that Robbie Coetzee, hooker from South Africa, will be joining the team. And an interesting thing is that apparently he was given the choice to choose between LA and Austin. So Gilchrist is having an interesting, how do I want to put this? Interesting marketing and recruiting platform and saying, hey, I've got 2 options. I've got Texas. I've got California. Which place that's sunny would you like to live? And then perhaps depending on the team and the living situations, the players can kind of pick and choose. So a very interesting little bit that came out of the interview. But we're going to move on again, guys. And this is quite big. And this little bit of news, everyone's kind of been waiting for Stu's reaction to it. Rob Howley has been hired by Rugby Canada to be the national men's team's assistant coach, and he will also be a coaching consultant for the Toronto Arrows. Now, Stu, I'm going to ask you this question first as our
because every single person on Facebook was like, what does Stu think about this?
What does Stu think?
And I feel like, man, like Dan, like, how do we feel about this, man? Should we feel like, and like, is it just because he's Welsh that like he's got the opinion on the Welsh coach?
Yes.
Like, I don't. Yeah.
Yes, it's exactly what it is.
It's 100%. Okay, so I shouldn't feel bad about this. I shouldn't be like people don't like me or anything, right? No. You guys took a little too long to answer that question, but I'll let it
I had to
slide.
drink some water, Derek. I was thirsty.
Yeah, exactly. You had to drink some water out of that gigantic barrel that you have.
You like that?
There.
I got it from Costco.
Dude, it's bigger than your head, man.
I know. All right. So
how thirsty are you during this podcast?
It's a work thing. So like, I work in an elementary school, and the only water fountain in my school, because it's an old school, is in the bottom floor, and I'm on the upper level. And normally it wouldn't be a big deal because I would either fill my water bottle up the sink, but because of COVID, they've wrapped up all of those water fountains, and they only have the one water fountain downstairs because it's you don't have to touch a button for it. It's a new one where you can just put it over. It's motion sensitive and turned on. So for the first 2 weeks of school, I was running with 2 water bottles, so I never had to fill any up, and it was getting annoying to carry around 2 water bottles. So I said, screw that noise, and I got this guy,
a gigantic barrel,
and it's great. It's got a little.
How many liters is that? Like,
it is 64 ounces, or 1.9 liters.
I was going to say, can you give me that measurement in Canadian, please? What's this
it's almost a 2-liter bottle of pop, basically.
Yeah. Jeez. Do like kids get upset when you're like at the water fountain and it takes you 20 minutes to refill?
No, because I fill this up at home and I don't have to fill it up until I get home. It's great. Anyway, Stu,
yes.
how do you feel? What are Rugby Canada and the Toronto Arrows getting from Howley? He's got a resume that speaks for itself.
Absolutely. This is a coach who has been part of 4 Six Nations victories, 3 of them Grand Slams. The other one was during his 2013 reign as caretaker coach while Scotland was on Lions duty. And during that time, Wales scored their highest victory over England in a 30-3 victory that denied England the Grand Slam. He's also been on 2 Lions tours as a player and part of the 2009 Lions coaching staff. He's helped coach Wales to a Rugby World Cup semi-final and quarter-final, which at the time it was the best record for any of the home nations. He also has 14 years playing experience. That includes 2 Premiership titles and the Heineken Cup victory that we've all seen, that his last minute never say die try won that victory for Wasps. This is a coach that also has the benefit of working with Warren Gatland, whose strategy was not only just working for his union, but working with the clubs of those unions as well. And that's advising certain players to be trialed in certain different positions. And that's how we got Jamie Roberts going from fullback into a crash ball centre and being one of the world's best in the 2000s and early 2010s. And this would be a phenomenal benefit to both Rugby Canada and Toronto Arrows. And that just with having that consultancy role. So even if Rob Howley says like, oh, maybe we can have this player in this position instead, because he knows that that would then benefit the national team and would hopefully get Canada a few wins come the America's Rugby Championship in 2021.
He can suggest to put Giuseppe Dutoit on the wing.
Exactly.
If Rob Howley suggests that, we should be like, you can stay in Wales, man.
All you need to do is improve his.
Or maybe it's a Welsh thing.
Test.
Maybe it's like just Welsh people are just like, that dude should be a winger, and
hey,
us in North America just don't see how it works.
Well, in 2015, the third choice scrum half was put on the wing, and all that followed was a phenomenal try that eventually led to Wales beating England in England's World Cup. So, don't rule anything out. Ultimately, the amount of experience definitely comes to Canada's and Toronto's benefit. That said, there's a reason why he's coming to Canada and not Italy, as was predicted at the end of or in the middle of 2019. The scandal from betting on rugby games has obviously been at the forefront of any discussion of Rob Howley since. And I think what a lot of people are looking for are reassurances that Howley is in the right mind space. I know that there have been articles saying that he's been seeing a psychologist to ensure that he won't fall into the trap of gambling again. And obviously that helps immensely, and it's obviously the right thing to do. But then there's also the concern of being out of the sphere of rugby to then rejoining it, and people are obviously going to be concerned. Now, I will state right now that I have no training in mental health. I'm not the person to really be speaking on this, but like Howley said, and what a lot of the coaching staff, both in Canada and Wales, have said, is that everyone is capable of making mistakes. He wasn't in the right mind space when this happened. He was going through a family tragedy, which sparked this addiction. And to be a realist or a pessimist, whichever way you look around this, I know that relapses are possible. And the thing that Rob Howley and Rugby Canada and the Toronto Arrows need to have in place is that the chances of relapse are as low as possible. But should, and God forbid, I hope it doesn't, a relapse does happen, there needs to be a sense of care put in place to ensure that it's addressed as soon as possible. And I think that would be the best, not only for Rugby Canada and the Toronto Arrows, but Rob Howley himself.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess over Howley, I guess, man, like the betting scandal would kind of through World Rugby's investigation kind of determined that he placed 363 bets covering 1,163 different matches. Um, and ultimately that like what based on what he did, so World Rugby also determined that over that time, so that was from November 2015 to September 2019, he lost about 4,000 pounds roughly, while he was gambling on these games. But ultimately, World Rugby, so basically he broke regulation 6.3.1, which is prohibited betting, from like the World Rugby, like, corruption handbook and everything. Um, where it was basically no connected person to the game can place bets on games. And then that comes with, it's a very interestingly worded kind of rule. If you go and pull it up on the World Rugby website, you can find these regulations in their rule book. And it was essentially the minimum penalty for it if it's one bet on a non-connected event. So, i.e., like an event that, like, say you're not a player for the team, you're not a coach for the two teams. Um, the minimum can be a warning, like literally just a warning if they're like, you put out one bet. The minimum bet is for like the connected in 6 months. The minimum bet for like one bet on a connected event gets you a 6-month ban, and then it kind of goes up, and you can get up to 5 years of a suspension for betting on these sports. There is additional, like, depending on what you are actually convicted of doing or whatever, like match fixing carries just a straight up lifetime ban if you're found to do that, which is probably fair. But this doesn't, like, it definitely doesn't sound like he was involved in any match fixing and stuff, just trying to, trying to win some money,
Yeah.
personal gain and all that. And obviously, like, he was losing. So, like that is what it is there too. My whole thing with that is I agree with like Stu. It's, you know, that I think what you're kind of looking at here, and Kingsley Jones was quoted by Neil Davidson of the Canadian Press, and he was basically talking about how him knowing Rob Howley was a major factor in him actually deciding to go through and hire him. And he said that, quoted from Davidson's article, he said that if it was a situation where I didn't know the coach, I don't think we would be going down this road. But I've known Rob for 30 years almost. We played sevens with him, played for Wales with him. We've been on some long tours, South Africa, Australia, etc. 5-6 week rugby tours where one of us had been the captain or the vice captain. We've have a very tight relationship, so I know Rob very well. So what I'm kind of like reading into this is, it's like it sounds like you have a guy that made a mistake, and you're trying to help him land back on his feet, after that. And I think basically what the way I see this is that Rob Howley gets a second chance. He gets to re-enter the rugby world as a coach. It's a 3-year contract that takes it through the Rugby World Cup, which I also think was kind of interesting how Rugby Canada worded that, because it's like, we got to, hopefully Rob Howley can help actually, let's get to the World Cup, because that's not a guaranteed thing either. So it's through the World Cup, and I think Rugby Canada gets to give that guy a second chance, and in return, you get one of the best tactical coaches in the world that in all likelihood would not end up in Canada without this betting scandal. And I think too, like, in the sense that, World Rugby handed down the suspension that they thought was just for what he did. And as I said, it's like the regulation that he broke that prohibited betting, it can carry anywhere from a 6-month to a 5-year suspension. And they gave him that 18-month ban, but only 9 months of it was suspended. So out of, a possible 5 years, he got 9 months, which I guess shows how World Rugby views like the severity of the incident. And I think, as with any player, man, like, you see, like, players get suspended for things all the time. They get suspended for, dirty plays in games, or they get suspended for things they do off the field. And once that suspension's up, it's like, you want that player back on the field, right? Like, England or the Saracens are not going to feel bad when Owen Farrell's suspension for that hit is over, right? They're going to play him. He's one of the best players in the world. He's a key cog in their team. They're going to play him. And I think right now it's kind of, World Rugby is going to allow Howley to coach. So I think if he's willing to come to Canada and take that opportunity, give that guy a second chance, and it's probably a lot cheaper than what he would normally make too. I say why not? And it's like, let Rugby Canada benefit from having one of the best tactical, let the Arrows benefit from it. And more importantly too, let the Arrows coaches benefit from it too. Like, he's been the attack coach for the Lions. He's been the attack coach for Wales. Right. Like, let them soak up that knowledge, and like, not just for the players, but let them, like, the Arrows staff become better coaches. Let like Mark Whitaker, Chris Silverthorne, Corey Hector, Pete Smith, Dave Butcher, like, let those guys, hear what he has to say. And it's like, I think Major League Rugby has to be about developing players, but also about developing coaches. And, ultimately, I think it's a good, it's a beneficial situation. I think I agree with Stu. You got to kind of keep a tight leash on any gambling, on the gambling side of that, right? But I think that's the whole thing, right? Is Kingsley Jones is bringing in his friend too, right? Like, you're trying to help out your friend get back on your feet after going through something. And I don't see an issue with that. You do have to monitor the situation as well, though. But and I think, in exchange for being willing to give your friend a second chance, you get one of the best tactical minds in the world. I think it's a good thing to be doing for Rugby Canada, and I hope the Arrows and Canada can benefit from it.
So other notes about that press release is the director of rugby operations for Rugby Canada thanked Bill Webb and the Arrows for their partnership in conjunction with the philanthropic donations from dedicated rugby supporters in aiding Rugby Canada's ambition to bring Rob to Canada. So we knew that finances were tough and tight with Rugby Canada, especially during COVID. So it's interesting that they put that in their release to kind of shed a little bit of light of how this is going to be managed. As stated at the beginning of it, it is going to be a 3-year signing program, signing deal. So that will run through the end of the 2023 World Cup. I believe Derek mentioned that. So a very interesting relationship. My last question, guys, is we have now seen 2 MLR teams hire consultants between Eddie Jones signing and now Howley. So do we think that this might be something that, in accordance with trying to develop, North American coaches, do we think that more teams will look towards doing this? Bringing in coaches that just do a consulting, via web and then come for 2 or 3 weeks during the season to help out? Is that something that they might do instead of just going and trying to hire a big coach and blow a bunch of money?
Well, when there was the announcement of Michael Czechia being a consultant for Argentina for the revamped rugby championship that'll be held hopefully later this year, I saw that image. I saw the word consultant, and I was like, okay, which MLR team has gotten Czechia on their books? So I don't know. At this point, I'm just waiting for Steve Hansen to say that he's helping out Utah and the Warriors, because it's not going to surprise me. It's a very smart move to take, and I think for a young league with the potential to maximize its profits later down the line, to then say like, oh, we've had this international head coach and this international head coach consulting our teams, and one of which is the runner-up at the most recent Rugby World Cup. So these are big names that are coming into the mix, and there'll be investors that are looking at this, and hopefully they'll be saying like, well, if these guys know what they're talking about, and they clearly are because they've got these great big named coaches, then hopefully that it'll make sure that their teams will win. And then if I was to create a team and put them into MLR, and I was to get a consultant, then my profits would extrapolate, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting too. I think seeing the teams that have done this or whatever, like San Diego with Eddie Jones. San Diego was one of the best teams in MLR last year. They were the only 5-0 team when the season was called off. Toronto was the best team in the Eastern Conference, and they're the two guys that went out and added Eddie Jones to be a consultant in San Diego and Rob Howley to be a consultant in Toronto. And I think it might be something that you might see, like maybe teams will look into it, because it's like if Toronto and San Diego start like pulling away from the pack here, like the teams might feel the need to do it just to kind of keep pace, right? Like if you have those great rugby minds that are helping, that would be like helping a team. That could be a big advantage. I think for me though, with the Rob Howley signing, and I get obviously the arrows are a factor here, but I'm more excited to see what he does with Rugby Canada, like just with the men's national team, as opposed to the arrows. The arrows attack, I like the arrows attack. It's fun to watch. It's very dynamic. Wingers moving across the field all the time. It's great. But Canada, I know we've kind of like, I mean, when we were doing our World Cup episodes, we're kind of like criticizing it, being like, it's a little too predictable. There was the Squidge rugby video when he was doing his like pre-World Cup videos, and like half of it was just like Canada's attack is basically a line. And so I'm excited to see what Howley brings to that and like kind of revamp that attack a little bit. Wales is kind of an interesting team, and maybe Stu can kind of chime in on this, where it was like, it seemed like a lot of their, like, sometimes they get criticized for being like maybe a little bit on like the more boring side. But boring teams can also win too. And, the interesting thing is it might not have been the most flashy, but it was like Rob Howley's attack with Wales was damn efficient. Even if
I think that's the big thing is if you're going to do boring, you have to be crystal perfect on everything.
And that's the thing is like, I think Wales were that, right? They, Howley kind of favored the 1-3-3-1 sort of attack system. Forwards were relied on a lot to be making passes. Which, it's like there would be, and, obviously, as Stu alluded to, they use a lot of crash ball centers too, man. It's like, take the ball, run, bash through guys, make the gain line, get up, do it again. But I think the thing with Wales too, though, is like we said, is that they're coming off that 2019 Grand Slam in the World Cup year last year. So Howley was a part of that, and it was his attack and stuff. And through that entire Six Nation run there, the Wales actually had like the lowest amount of entries into the 22 over the whole tournament. They only had 25, but they had like the highest efficiency of it. And it was basically, if they entered the 22, they scored 64% of the time. When you walked into the 22, they said, which was 10 tries and 6 penalties. They actually got a 7th penalty attempt, but I can't remember who actually kicked it, but there was one that was missed. So it's like, it's efficient, and it's like, and you can watch some of like the Welsh tries, they all kind of look a little bit different. They might come based on what they've done in defense, right? Like create a turnover, but when they get that turnover, it's like the switch is clicked, and it's like they can run on you. But then it's like they could also when they get into the 22, they're like near impossible to stop, right? Like 64%, they score 2 out of 3 times when they enter the 22, which is that's a tough rate to deal with. They got, during that Six Nations, they had 3.48 points per entry, which was only bettered by England. But England didn't have as good as defense, right? So it's like they were like, Wales was able to pull away from that in that standpoint. But it's like, if the way the Welsh team kind of was, is they had good defense, and they would hold on to the ball a lot. They would kind of make teams take the ball back from them. But like when they got into the 22, you couldn't stop them. It was like, we've seen like us, like, I don't know I don't necessarily want to say it's super similar, but it was like, the Champions Cup this weekend watching Exeter. It was like, if Exeter hits the 5 meter line, you're like, throw 7 on the board. Like, because I'll assume the conversion will be good too, because they'll probably score in a very good place. But it's like they hit the 5 meter line, throw it on the board. It's tough to stop. And I feel like under Rob Howley, Wales kind of had that. And I'm like, I think ultimately, it's an unfortunate, maybe it's a bit of an unfortunate circumstance for why he's in Canada. His skill set, like you said, he was the Lions attack coach, like the Lions, the most prestigious team in the world, not named All Blacks, is basically most prestigious team in the Northern Hemisphere anyways, right? And, he was their attack coach. He was, he won a Lions tour against Australia with that attack. He drew the All Blacks with his attack. The Wales, as we said, Wales had all their success, all their Grand Slams, all their, deep runs at a World Cup with that attack. And it was like he was going to be Italy's head coach, was another tier 1 Six Nations country. And he's in Canada now. And we got one of the best coaches in the world, man. And I hope we can make use, like, I hope over the next 3 years, like, we get to like fully utilize that mind, that great rugby tactical mind that he has. And I hope he brushes off, brush off that rugby knowledge to all the coaches down the pipeline and in the players. And, Canada's attack has been a little stale lately. So hopefully he can inject some life into it. And, we've been falling down the world rankings since 2011. That game against Tonga, they won it in the World Cup, jumped up to 11th in the world rankings, and just been steadily falling down them since then. So, it's an interesting opportunity because of the circumstances that brings Howley here. But maybe having a good friend in Kingsley Jones, it can help him land back on his feet. And hey, we got one of the best attacking coaches in the world. So it'd be I hope it works out for all parties involved. And
I will mention that one of the big things about Rob Howley's attack and also Sean Edwards' defence for Wales is their reliance on fitness. And one of the big things between the 2015 and the 2019 World Cup training camps was they would put players through grueling fitness tests because they want their players to still be ready to go on the 80th minute instead of being gassed at the 65th and 70th minutes. Because you may have like the best forwards in the world, you may have the best backs in the world, but if your players are gasping for breath at like the 65th and 70th minute, they're going to start making mistakes. And that's what you notice with Wales, in that they were able to go the distance against teams. Now, to be fair, it did take them time. For example, against Australia, they got one victory in 2008 and then have to wait 10 years for the next one, which I'm never going to get back. And so, I'm not saying come the 2021 ARC, Canada is just going to be like the fighting Maple Leafs, just like ripped and ready to go. It may take time, but one of the big things was like their reliance on fitness. They tested the players in training and had leaderboards. Even Jonathan Davies, who's now one of the best centres in the world, when he started coming into these Welsh training squads, he admitted that his approach was lazy, and it was only when he was topping those leaderboards that he was getting selected. And I think that level of healthy internal competition combined with improved fitness, I think it's going to be great for Canada if that comes through.
I think there's been a lot of things too with like a lot of like, especially I think Canada, that could be a benefit to them as well. And I mean, even, to kind of borrow a little bit from hockey here, like that was one of Herb Brooks's big things when he was coaching Team USA, especially in the build up to the 1980 Olympics. It was like, we're definitely not the best team in the world, but like, we're going to be the fittest team in the world. And that's going to be a big help late in the third period. And you know what? It turned out to be a big help late in the third period against a lot of teams. Because at that tournament, the USA had a lot of comeback victories, yeah, like you can see it in other sports and stuff, man. And that's how I think across the board, it's like, that's how sometimes like teams that aren't as skilled, like those tier 2 nations, that's how you can, like, if you do get into a World Cup situation, that's how you can hang in a game if you're just able to work harder than the other team, right?
I think going off of what kind of Stu said with fitness and consistency is, I think that'll be his biggest problem, because, you know, in Wales, it's quite easy to have a camp get together and have all the guys, you still got some guys who are playing overseas and stuff like that. I mean, Canada, you got guys playing all over the place, and you do have the centralized program out in BC, but, we've seen how hard it is. So hopefully that'll be something that Rugby Canada will work with him and how to help keep his players honest when they're not always going to be as close together. I mean, again, how far of a drive is it to get all the guys in Wales together for, a centralized camp? Again, assuming that they're all in the same country, compared to, okay, well, we want to have a training camp with Rugby Canada. All right, everybody book your flights to BC.
And if COVID, like, for at least as far as fitness, if COVID has taught us anything, man, you can do coaching and stuff over Zoom.
It's true, but I mean,
right? It's like you can
it's different than having a guy working out in his home than having him working out at the training facility, and you can watch what's happening.
Yeah, so rugby shape's a little bit different than just lifting weights and stuff. You do need to actually play, but
it'll be very interesting. That's for sure.
Yeah, every coach has to adapt to. There's going to be a lot of new ways to coach the game and stuff over the next year or so, because everybody has to adapt to the new rules and everything.
For sure. So we're going to finish off with one last thing, guys. And it's actually, it's pretty damn cool, and we've all been kind of impressed with it. The Free Jacks announced their new New England-wide academy structure with 13 teams. And hot damn, did they knock it out of the park with some of these names. So I'm going to go down the list quickly, and then I want you guys to name which name you like the most. So we've got the Alarm, the Sea Serpents, the Champs, the Pine Rioters, the Mutineers, the Granite Hammers, the Night Watch, the Cobblers, the Lightfoots, the Silver Sharks, the Whistler Punks, the Pathfinders, or the River Rangers. So, Derek, you tell me who you like the most.
Well, first of all, I mean, like, I know we got some interesting team names in Major League Rugby. The Chicago team, or whoever that 14th team ends up being, you get this guy to name your teams. Whoever came up with this, no more owner's last name and then, random last syllable. Like, as much, like, it's like we have a guy that's coming up with these just sitting there. My personal favorite from this, man, there's so many good ones. I love Mutineers. That's a great name. I'm surprised, like, you don't really hear that as a name too much. Granite Hammers is cool. River Rangers is cool. The Alarm I kind of like, just because they just slapped the on it and stuff, and I'm not even really sure what that means. Champs is fun. I know the city that they're in is like Champlain, so it's like, I guess it's kind of like a city nickname, but it's, isolated. Calling yourself the Champs just sounds kind of cocky and arrogant, and I like it. But I think my favorite one, I'm going to go with the Night Watch, for the obvious Game of Thrones reference that it seems to bring about when you mention it. Also, their little intro video that they had, the kit looked awesome with like the stars and stuff on a solid black kit. So if I can get some Night Watch gear, I will try to do that, because that is a really cool name. Good on New England for creating this, though. It's an awesome program. I hope the academy works out well for them, and hopefully the Free Jacks themselves can benefit from it a lot.
I've got to admit, Night Watch was one of the names that took my eye. Mainly
it's because of the Game of Thrones. See, the only issue that I was thinking with the Night Watch, man, is it's like, I was just like, man, like, I feel like you're setting yourself up to get chirped during the game a little bit. With that, like, it's like a guy makes a bad play, you can be like, yeah, nothing, or something like that. But I was also just like, man, can you imagine someone just absolutely destroys a guy, and he can like stand up over him, and it's like that guy would be like, like riling in pain, and he'll just be like, your watch has ended, and leave.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
like you can taunt guys with it. I don't know. But
I was gonna say is that when any player from the Night Watch, if they get called up to play for the Free Jacks or any MLR team, they have to return their jersey and just say, my watch has ended.
Yeah, exactly. Or the other thing would be like, is the Night Watch going to be the team that none of the the teammate of the players that none of the other teams want, so they just send them to the Night Watch? Is that going to be part of it too? I don't know, but either way,
Derek cool is reading too much into it.
I'm reading way too much into this. Yeah,
as much as I like the Night Watch, it's not my favorite. That is split between two other names, which are the Pine Rioters and the Whistler Punks. Because it's like, yeah, we're punks, but we're the Whistler Punks. So get it right.
And like every time they score a try, you can hear doot doot. I
could absolutely love this hypothetical rugby match between the Whistler Punks and the Night Watch, where they're just being punks to the Night Watch, essentially, just taunting them all the time.
Dude, yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's yeah, all these names are awesome, man. It's amazing. Dan, who do you got?
Derek and I, before Stu came on, because I don't want to embarrass him.
Man, you got to stop calling him Steve on this.
I know. I don't know why.
You call me the right name, then the wrong name, and then back to the right name.
I know.
Yeah, he's only been on for like what are we on with you, Stu?
Couple
like
months
14
now.
episodes, something.
Yeah.
I don't want to show how much of a nerd I am, and we haven't talked about how much I love Dungeons and Dragons with Stu around, but like a lot of these give me those vibes. Like these seems like these are like pubs that I could go to, like in like a little fantasy town.
You open a treasure chest and there's a granite hammer inside.
There's a granite hammer. I mean, even like Pathfinder is a like tabletop RPG game.
Yeah.
Like that is one of them. But
there's the Rangers too.
The River Rangers, Rangers are a class. But I really like the Lightfoots, and I love that they had a little horn. Like I love all this musical stuff. I think that, I love the idea of it just being like a team full of nines. Like their scrum would be absolutely garbage, but good luck trying to catch them if they get the ball, and they're all gonna be jerks. So like to see them play like the Whistle Punks would be hilarious. So I love
like
it.
Did you see that they have like plaid jerseys or whatever? Like there's the one video they actually kind of released that they would show what the jerseys look like, and like
I have not seen this video. I need to look at this video.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, pull it up. It was on like the Free Jacks announcement. They had like a video of the of all the like what the kits would look like. I think the
Oh my God!
There it is, man. The Lightfoots are like plaid. Oh, it's awesome.
Oh, you know what? Just seeing the River Ranger one though, I think I might change my mind. I might go with the River Rangers.
Well, refresh my memory. What's the River Rangers color?
It's just a nice green, and it's got like details all over it. They're all great. So kudos to the Free Jacks for doing such a good job with it.
Half of these are better than the MLR names.
Half of these, yeah. Honestly,
like all the MLR.
Better than two of them, at least.
No, like more. That's probably better than more. Whoever's doing this, you get to name. Whoever did this gets to name the 14th team.
Yeah, exactly.
You've
they get the rights to name Chicago.
Yeah,
and Austin and LA. Like they just game time.
Well, no. Those are already named. You get to the next 10.
I think Austin has shown you that they are not afraid to change their name just because they had a name already.
Oh, they changed. They did twice in one off season.
Yeah,
but not like.
Hey, man, 3 names and like a.
You know what though? I think with that vote of confidence that Gilchrist got and stuff, I don't think his ideas are going anywhere. There was that other interview that Killebrew did with Alex Megalby, the owner of the Free Jacks, and they were saying that he was looking at making F45 like a big like league-wide sponsor too, right? So.
You need to give me
and the other interesting thing with that announcement too is the Giltini's logo was on the announcement, even though they're still not on the website.
Websites, their Twitter's dead.
They're still been like completely radio silent as far as social media, which is a terrible strategy, really, at this point. Like even if you are changing your name, call yourself the LA Rugby Club and start marketing your team and do a team announcement closer to the season, team name announcement closer to the season.
Go into
or just use Giltini's. Use Giltini's at this point.
To even just go into how little information there is about the Giltinis, there is one article on Major League Rugby's website about the Giltinis, and it's about being welcome into the league.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
But we talked about this before, and you know what, guys, we're gonna end it there, and it's night here before my brain explodes out of frustration. We will get back at interviewing some more rugby guys soon. So look forward to hearing more from some more Canadian rugby players. Please go back and listen to some of our previous episodes where we interview Andrew Ferguson and Cole Keith. Those interviews were fantastic. Both of them kind of gave their experiences about what's happening with COVID and their previous rugby experiences. Cole talks about his time with the World Cup, and Andrew kind of talks about what's it like to living with another pro athlete who is going to be playing hockey in China. So a lot of different things happen in those episodes. So please tune in to enjoy those, and you can go to Rouge Rugby. Where Steve or Stu? Oh, I did it again.
Jeez, man, I don't. Do I have to edit?
Ask Steve. Yeah. Ask Steve.
Do I have to? Should I edit all of these to be like?
No, it's just that one.
I don't even want to edit all the Steve calls out because I feel like it already takes me long enough to edit this, and I don't want to put in any more time. So. Jeez, Stu, hey Stu, next week can you put a giant poster board thing behind you, on that nice wall? Just spray paint Stu.
I am Stu.
It says Stu on the screen right now too.
I'm looking at my notes. I need to put Stu everywhere just so I'm reminded.
Yeah, we've only been doing this for 2 months. It's fine. It's fine that you don't know his name. It's fine.
Stu, where can the fine folks find us on social media?
Not by searching Steve, that's for damn sure.
Absolutely. You can find us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Spotify. Search for the Rouge Rugby Podcast.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for getting together with us, and we will be back next week. Thank you.